This weekend, much attention has been focused on Lexington and Concord, but the South Shore played a very significant role in the early days of the Revolutionary War. And joining us this morning with his perspective is Peter Drummey of the Massachusetts Historical Society. Mr. Drummey, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Dan. And I should say happy Evacuation Day, because I believe this is the day British troops stationed in Marshfield evacuated the town. So long before the evacuation of Boston in 1776, there was an evacuation of Marshfield.
And, of course, so that was just one of the events that were happening around this time in this area.
Yes, when we think of the Lexington alarm and troops marching towards this alarm that had gone out through eastern Massachusetts, the Plymouth County militia were organized to march to Marshfield, not to go towards Lexington and Concord, but to go to Marshfield, because there was a force of more than 100 British soldiers. Everyone was British then, but the regulars were based at the what was then called the Nathaniel Ray House, the house that we know today as the Daniel Webster House, a very large, elegant house built before the Revolution, and the residence of someone very faithful to the king and the royal government, Nathaniel Ray Thomas. But troops had been sent in January of 1775 to essentially protect the people loyal to the royal government and to keep order in Marshfield and the towns around it, but based in Marshfield. So there had been tension going back. All the events we think of in the lead up to the Revolution had had taken place on a smaller scale on the South Shore, in the South Shore towns, with Marshfield being understood as being essentially having a larger population of loyalists, essentially a town split between what they would have called loyalists and patriots at that time.
And that's an interesting point, because we tend to think that people were either on one side, that most people, of course, naturally supported the Revolution, but in a lot of towns it was very split loyalties.
Yes, and the only thing, there was a large enough loyalist presence in Marshfield that it was out in the open. I think a lot of people in a town were probably just keeping quiet about where they really stood until fighting began. But in Marshfield, you had a kind of, they burnt it, but a sort of local tea party back in early in 1774, that they had petitions that one faction would essentially be in charge of the town meeting and send a petition saying, we will help pay for the destroyed tea, and then another faction would take over the town meeting and say, no, that was the perfectly appropriate action. So you have those two things going, and this is also within families, what we say brother against brother in the Civil War. But in Marshfield, you had long-settled families, and you'll have people, Winslows and Whites and old Pilgrim Marshfield names divided. Nathaniel Thomas, sort of leading figure in the Friends of the King, and John Thomas, who's not a brother but a member of another branch of the same family, being the head of the militia on the South Shore. So he born in Marshfield, living in Kingston at the time of the Revolution, but nevertheless, you have right within families this divide that we see across the town, and in some respects across the Commonwealth.
All right, well, we're going to have to leave it right there, but thank you so much for speaking with us. We do appreciate it.
My pleasure.